Hi, I'm Matt Donovan, and this is the Good People Podcast.
It's a tip of the cap, it's a pat on the back, it's a smile from ear to ear. They're the good people from round here.
Yes, welcome to another episode of the Good People Podcast, brought to you by In Other Good News. My name is Andy, and today I have a guest on the show who's doing some great things in the world. I have joining me today, I've got Matthew Donovan from the Food for Change Foundation. Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
Cheers, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I was only introduced to your work semi-recently.
Yep.
But it sounds really cool. It sounds really amazing. So what I want to do first up is I just want to talk about Food for Change and maybe some of the impacts that you've got, and then we'll talk about how you got there.
Yeah, good. Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. So tell us about Food for Change. What happens at Food for Change on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, pretty simply, we grow food on unused farmland and donate that out. We run the IGA Food Rescue Program around the country, which we obviously donate all that food out as well. And we provide support to other food relief organisations however we can, whether that's purchasing additional food for them, sending them food boxes, helping them with their gardens or whatever that might be.
Yeah. So you use unused land to grow extra food?
Correct.
And where do you do that?
Our main site's down at Mount Martha, so not too far out of the city. So we've got about 5 acres down there.
Yeah. And what do you grow? What do you grow down there?
Anything you can think of. So pretty much what's in the supermarket and in season, effectively.
Yeah.
So at the moment, there's lots of broccoli and cauliflower in. We've got lots of spinach and things like that. And then obviously throughout the year, that'll change. So.
And do you have like gardeners, horticulturalists working with you on doing that? How do you do that?
No, we do it all ourselves. So
Yeah, right.
I'm not trained in it. Everyone always asks me. I just basically put some seeds in the ground and we kind of see what happens.
Yeah, you do what you're told? If you've got someone who knows what's going on with the seeds, or?
It's something like I've always grown things and kind of worked on farms when I was at university and done different things. I had a bit of enough to get into a bit of trouble, I guess, is what I tell people. And then, we just kind of learn as we go along.
Yeah, right. So are there things you can't grow down at Mount Martha? Like, I mean, you've got fruit and vegetable or basic vegetables and things like that you'd be able to grow. Is there things you just can't grow down there?
Oh, I mean, probably mangoes and things like that, watermelons, stuff like that.
Tropical
that
stuff.
Tropical.
Yeah.
But otherwise, this part of the country is a really good growing climate for a lot of food. So
Good soils down at Mount Martha?
not too bad. A little bit of clay on that side of things. So we tend to add different things to it. But otherwise pretty good.
Yeah, right. So then you grow this food, and then where does it go?
We distribute that on with our partners. So effectively all across Victoria. So small harvests stay inside the local community. Our big harvests go out with Second Bite predominantly, and they distribute that across the city and out into the regional areas as well.
And Second Bite is another organisation?
Yeah, another food relief organisation, very similar to Food Bank, but they specialise more on the fresh food side of things.
Yeah, okay. So you grow the food and it goes to pretty local places.
Yep.
And how would you differ to something like a food bank?
Probably the main point of difference, it's probably two of them. The first one is obviously we grow the food, which Food Bank don't. And then on our rescue side of things, obviously Food Bank's over at Yarraville.
Yep.
If they were to drive all the way down to Mount Martha, pick up the food, drive it back and then distribute it, sometimes they'll bring it straight back into the same area. So if you've got a small amount of food that needs rescuing, say from a local IGA, there's no point in them driving all that way down there. So what we do is developed an app, and that keeps the food from those IGA stores inside the local community and saves that sort of transport and logistics cost and reduces the food miles.
Yeah, of course, because if it's just burning around the country, it's,
Yeah.
plus all the extra cost of everything.
Yeah, and at the food bank level, like when you're talking pallets and pallets, that's fantastic. That's the best way to do it. When we're talking about a small IGA store that's, only got a couple of shopping trolleys worth of food that they want to donate, then there's no point moving it around like that.
Yeah, sure. And when you talk about rescue, can you tell us a bit more about what is rescuing food? What does that mean?
Basically, it's just making sure it doesn't go to landfill, anything that's fit for consumption, effectively. A lot of the times, and I know myself when I'm in a food store, if I see a banana and it's got a few spots, naturally, even I still pick the one that hasn't got it because my son won't eat it. So it's that kind of food where we know it's edible, but the shops won't be able to sell it because of basically consumers. And so we rescue that and make sure it gets donated out.
It's the ugly fruit.
Basically.
It's the ugly fruit that doesn't get eaten, Because we've got a real problem with that, don't we? Because we are so picky in general with fruit and veg that we just leave ugly fruit and then it just ends up being wasted.
Yeah, and it all tastes fine. And it is, I think it's just human nature. Like, as much as we say the supermarkets drive it, are the supermarkets just responding to our human nature?
Yep.
And, they've got a profit margin they want to maintain, so...
Yeah, well, I guess when you're choosing something, you're picking something that is appealing to look at. And they say the only thing worse than a worm in your apple is half a worm in your apple.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, well, you can use that there. That's a free joke.
Thank you.
Today's joke. So, all right, so you're rescuing the foods. It's getting reused, which is good. It means that we're not just growing as much food and wasting it. What kind of an impact is Food for Change having?
To date, roughly about 3 million meals that we've donated to
Holy
people
moly.
across the country.
3 million meals.
Yeah.
And how do you measure what a meal is?
For us, a meal is half a kilogram of food. So if you eat half a kilogram, you're pretty full. So that's kind of how we track it.
3 million meals. And when did you start doing this?
First planting was the 25th of Feb 2017, so just over 6 years ago.
And that was in Mount Martha?
That was at another site in the city that is the farmland's now been sold. But yeah.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, that's huge, 3 million meals. I want to dig into how you got there. You mentioned your son and a banana.
Yep.
And I believe that is actually kind of part of the story, right?
It is a little bit. I only just realised it's my go-to now when I talk about food a lot.
Yeah.
For me, it was 2016, and I just relocated to Melbourne. Just been through a divorce, had my son pretty much most of the time on that side of things. And, he was going into daycare, and all of a sudden I went from running a company and having, lots and lots of staff and doing all these sorts of things, and found myself pretty bored, effectively. So the company was closed down. He was going to daycare. I'm like, what am I going to do? So I started volunteering in around food relief, and had kind of previously lumped food insecurity just into homelessness. I kind of know that now it only makes up about 5 to 7% roughly of actually the food insecure people in the country, and was just volunteering and doing the things and kind of, trying to help out wherever I could, and looking into the statistics, and it was just shocking that at that particular time, it was roughly 2.2 million people that were seeking food relief around the country. Unfortunately, that number's gone up closer to 3 million now. And what really got me was, of all those people seeking food relief, about 70,000 each month were getting turned away. So they'd go out, you hear about these amazing organisations, the Vinnie's soup vans, all the food banks, everything. You get there and they still don't have enough food for you. And 1/3 of those is kids. So for me, it really dropped when I'd come home and picked him up from daycare. We'd done our food shop, and the following day he's like, Dad, I'm hungry. I'm like, yep, that's fine, mate. Just grab a banana or whatever out of the fruit bowl. And he's like, there's nothing there. I'm like, what do you mean there's nothing there? We went food shopping yesterday. And that was the thing. It was like, well, that's okay for me. Like, I can just go get some more food. We'll go out. We're having lunch out. Like, it's a really privilege, and I'm very grateful for the position I was in. But then it was just like, what happens if that's your food shop for the fortnight and you've got 3 kids? And I couldn't imagine what that feels like as a parent. And then to have, the guts and to put that shame aside and reach out and kind of look for that food, and then once again get told, sorry, we don't have enough food to help you, must be really heart-wrenching. And we hear stories all the time of parents not eating, making sure the kids are fed as good as possible. And I guess from there I was just like, well, this is ridiculous. Like, we live in such an abundant country. There's so much here. There's so much money. There's so many amazing people. Let's just try and do something about it. And that's kind of the original concept was, let's just find some empty space. There's plenty of it about. We'll put a few seeds in the ground and we'll just give the food away. And that's kind of really how it the nuts and bolts of it started.
And to think that it's not just that they don't have the food on the table. It's that we throw away so much food.
Yeah.
Like that we just waste it. We've got it.
Yeah.
And if we just used it, like if you think about when you cook a soup with tomatoes,
Yeah.
like it doesn't matter what the tomatoes look like before you cook a soup, does it?
Nah.
Like, because you end up boiling them down. And
Yeah.
so like there's so much just waste that could easily be used in great nourishing stuff. Yeah. It is a real heart-wrenching thing in the school programs and things, and hearing how many kids go to school all the time without
it's
breakfast.
Crazy. Yeah.
It's nuts. Certainly in the current environment as well, it's more and more.
Yep.
And I know that when there's statistics coming around about people seeking food relief and how many of them never had to do that before. So that's also heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Can we touch on, because I've thought a little bit about this as well, is it possible we can touch on your dad?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think, and I'll let you tell the story of that, but do you think that maybe also helped shape your opinions of this and how that all unfolded?
Yeah, definitely. I think for anybody that ends up starting anything really, there's a whole heap of different factors that get you to that point. I could probably reel off 50 or 60 of them, but my dad is the number one factor, absolutely. For a large period of his life before he passed away, he was homeless. And that was unbeknownst to the family on that side of things. So I was living in London at the time. It must have been 2004, 2005. He received a terminal diagnosis for cancer and was basically given 6 months to live. And so I know all this, just to caveat this, only because I've been through the documentation years later. But this is how the timeline is unfolded. So my dad, being my dad, loved to party, loved to travel, and just decided to take, he had a couple of months left. He's like, I'm just going to go traveling. So he went out and travelled and sailed around the world and did all these amazing trips, which I've seen the photographs for, but kind of also dropped off the radar at the same time. Didn't tell anybody what was happening. I completely fell out of contact with him, couldn't email him, couldn't call him, had no idea what was going on. Then basically after that, he lived for another 8 years. So he'd spent all his money, the insurance had stopped, couldn't go back to work, still had to undergo treatment, and basically fell into that cycle of, not enough money for rent, not enough money for food, became homeless. The Wesley Mission, just before he passed away, about 6 to 8 months, picked him up off the streets and put him in a shelter and looked after him, which we're very grateful for. But even then, I had no idea what was happening. It wasn't until I got a call from the Liverpool Hospital in Sydney where they said, are you, Matthew Donovan? We have your dad here. He is passing away. He needs to go to palliative care. And I'm like, whoa. Just had no idea, and just literally this was probably about 2-3 months before my son was born, so yeah, it was quite difficult, and we went through that process, and he passed away in September, about 6 weeks after Isaac was born.
And like that's obviously a huge shock because he was off the radar, right? You just didn't know anything about it, and so he's been living. He's basically got to a point where he can't afford to live or get his treatment or whatever, and has just gone into homelessness. Yeah. And so that sort of a situation can really highlight even if the illness wasn't treatable, just the quality of life. Yeah. Like who's there to catch the people, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite, and it was, so when I came back from London, so Isaac was born in, was it 2013? So that's when Dad passed away. In 2012, I did see him. I got married that particular year, and he turned up to the wedding in a tuxedo in a limo.
Right.
Completely hid everything. He was still homeless.
Right. Wow. So he really just didn't want anyone to know.
Didn't want anyone to know.
What do you think that was?
A lot of pride, I think, and obviously the conversing shame attached to that, and not being able to provide or whatever. I don't know.
Yep. Had he had an otherwise reasonably, like, was his life before those points relatively regular? Like, was it?
Yeah, nothing like out of the ordinary. Had a very good, high-paying job at Westpac.
Yep.
And yeah, had a lovely home, nice car. Like on the surface, everything's fine. And then just one day you get hit with that diagnosis, and your world changes.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thought of someone close to you being homeless, how much do you feel like that's contributed a bit also to this drive to create the food rescue? And
very much so initially. On that side of things, along with a lot of other factors. Obviously being in the right time, in the right place. I've had a lot of other business experience. Food's always been a big part of my family. My mum was a chef. We had a restaurant on Kangaroo Island. Had always worked on farms at various times. There was all these different factors. But that and Isaac with the food, the two tipping points, effectively.
They were enough to sort of make you realise you need to do something.
Yeah, and I was in a privileged position. I could give back, and I wanted to give back.
Yeah. And what year was that?
That was in 2016 when we kind of started that process of registering the charity, and then we did that first planting in 2017.
And is that hard to do, register a charity?
I don't know. It depends on your definition of hard. For me, it was fine.
Yep.
On that side of things.
Yep.
There's a lot of loopholes and things you have to go to, which is fair enough.
Yep.
But yeah, I found it pretty easy.
And I guess extra governance. You would have extra governance each year.
Yeah.
To make sure that you... Yeah.
That we're doing everything above board. And the government does it very well in the charity sector. I think there's about 50,000 charities in Australia that operate. And the governance levels changes as you increase and you go up.
Yep. So what was step one then? You said, I want to do something. Then what did you do? What was the action plan?
It was a pretty simple action plan on that side of things. Step one was, okay, we're doing it. Step two was to call two people that I deeply trusted, who I knew would call bullshit, basically, on me if it's needed. And I asked them to be a part of the board, which they kindly did. Step three was register the charity. And step four, find the first plot of land. And all of that process took about 6 months. And then we just have grown organically from there, really.
So was your initial plan with the charity, was it initially to just grow food, or is it always going to be to rescue food as well?
It was always initially just to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So our initial tagline was grow, distribute, and support.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's grow, rescue, support.
Yeah.
On that side of things. And the support just kind of evolved. We were going to farmers markets, talking to local businesses, just trying to get a real in-depth feel of on the ground and small. And we had so many people come up and say, I've called Food Bank, I've called Oz Harvest, I've called Second Bite, they won't come and pick up this food. And I'm like, what do you mean?
So the size, like the amount.
Yeah. And it could be, like I said, up to, 2 trolleys worth of food that's perfectly edible and perfectly good to go. And they're all saying the same thing. I just don't know what to do with it. And at the time, I know where I was, there was like 8 organisations within 2 kilometres of these people, and they wanted food. So I'm like, what is missing here? So that's when the idea of the rescue and the development of the app basically came out. So anybody now can go on our website. On the top right-hand side, there's a button called Donate Food. You can hit that button and find any food relief agency across the country closest to you. And
that will give you a place to go donate some food.
Yep, give them a call. All the details are there, and you can just drop it off.
Yeah, and we'll better mention your website here too, which is foodforchange.org.au, and I'll put that in the show notes as well, and it'll be I'll put it on the bottom of the video here later on. So they can go to your website and they can find somewhere to take food to drop it off. And then what's the partnership with IGA? What did I read about that?
Yeah, so effectively, as I was developing that app that sits inside our website, the Metcash who own IGA also own Mitre 10, and their head office was 2 kilometres from our farm. So I was actually there to speak to Mitre 10 and try and get some sponsorship and things like that. Still haven't been able to, but our partnership with IGA is cruising along nicely, and had a meeting with the marketing team, and they had just completed a survey with the New South Wales Environmental Protection Agency in and around food waste inside their stores, and they were having exactly the same problem that we had. So I turned to them and I said, look, I actually have a solution. It was just one of these, right place, right time. Here it is. We'll build you a specific app. Give me 6 weeks.
Yep.
And we went away. We reconfigured everything, built them their own platform, came back, presented it to them. And they were like, yep, that's fantastic. Let's trial it. So this is 2018. So we trialed it over 2 years in various stores, ironed it out, made sure it was working perfectly. We're all ready to launch at their National Expo in 2020, and we all know what happened then.
Yeah.
So,
Not run the expo.
Yeah, no, we did not run the expo. So thankfully we went to Expo last year. I think we're in just over 300 stores around the country,
Yep.
And rolling out store by store. So there's quite a few in Victoria that are now on board. Yeah.
That's unreal. What happened? What was it like for you guys during the lockdowns? What happened with did it get massive or?
There was a couple of things that happened. It was, for the first time ever, we had people physically walk onto the farm looking for food, which was a bit confronting and like, oh, okay, wow, this is getting bad. And people were, what the supermarkets were like. The shelves were empty in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So people who had no food would go to the supermarket and find that all the cheap, lower food that they were buying was also not there. So now I can't afford the expensive food. So it was this real compounding effect, which was very hard to deal with. And unfortunately, we don't do that. That's not our specialty. You might need other help. And we just, directed them to the right people in their community. The other thing we noticed was obviously all our corporate volunteers completely disappeared.
Yep.
Overnight. So we had a massive farm that we had to run with no volunteers. Thankfully, we were able to issue work permits. So if people were aware of us, they could come volunteer as an individual. So we built up a really strong, standard crew on that side of things. And very, very grateful for me personally and my son and some friends. We were able to issue some work permits, which meant people didn't have to be stuck at home. They could come out to the farm, work out in the open, mingle, socialise. Our beds are 1.2 metres wide conveniently. So if you're in one row and the other person's in the other row, you've got your social distancing covered and different things. And obviously we had all the regulations in place and what we had to do. And the biggest thing that probably came out of that was the farms didn't stop. We kept sending out food and more and more and more. And I received probably about 4 or 5 emails post shutdown that basically, without putting it, I don't know how bluntly to put it, but effectively these people didn't commit suicide because they had the farm.
Jesus.
And that was like,
yeah,
heavy.
They said that the farm, as in these were volunteers, or were these people getting relief?
Volunteers. They're
man.
Mentally it saved me.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, okay.
That's a responsibility you don't see coming.
No, it's an amazing extra benefit on top of what we're doing. And the mental health side, we get mentioned all the time at the farm by the volunteers and how much it does help them. But in that circumstance, it was that extra bit.
Give them something to do.
Yep.
And some purpose. Yeah.
Some fresh air.
That's unreal. More farms?
More farms.
Plan to get some more farms?
Yep. Yeah. So we're just looking in Tassie at the moment as the next one.
Yep.
And the goal is to have one in each capital city.
Yep. Whereabouts in Tassie?
In between Hobart and the Huon Valley.
All right. Okay.
Yep.
And can you grow the same stuff there?
Pretty much.
Yep.
Yeah. Just have to be a bit more wary of the frost tolerance of different species and different things. But yeah, pretty similar.
Right. And so then farms in capital cities is the size of the farm that you've got here down in Mount Martha.
Yep.
Is that big enough?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Because it's manpower as well as because you can't actually just have more land because you've got to look after it too, right?
Yeah, exactly. We have to tend it. Everything is based around regenerative agriculture. So, we don't spray any chemicals and things like that. We make sure we're putting, a lot of nutrients back into the soil and building that up. And So we're trying to make sure our impact on the land is obviously minimised while we're growing as much of the food as possible.
Yeah, right. It's really nice. And you're out there rolling the sleeves up.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Yeah.
Hands in the dirt.
Yeah.
Have you improved as a farmer? You're saying you weren't the expert, but
yeah, I don't think I was ever that bad. I mean, I'm also I'm not too worried if I kill something on that side of things. So we'll just get on with it and do it and change it. I'm a pretty laid back and relaxed person on that side of things. So definitely have a lot more knowledge and it comes together a lot quicker now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And so what do you need in the future? What do you want to do with it? I mean, you're going to increase the farms.
Yep.
But is there anything holding you back?
It's always funding, effectively dollars in the account. We run a really lean business as it is. So effectively there's 2 staff members. The rest is volunteers. So our grant writers, our volunteer coordinators volunteer. We have people doing various office roles and things like that, as well as on the ground at the farms, which is great. We don't own the farms. We don't own any vehicles. We don't own the crates that the food goes out in. Everything's very, very low cost. And we get grant funding to cover off most of those costs, but grant funding doesn't cover wages. So for us, having additional income streams as we build that up and having additional support from our corporate partners will allow us to employ a few more people to then ramp it up to the next level, which is what we need to do.
Yeah. And that's common, isn't it? The grants, they don't want to cover wages.
Yeah.
They want to cover infrastructure or something like that.
Yeah, they want like a shiny shed to attach their name to. But there's no point having the shed if I can't afford to pay the insurance for the volunteers.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. So it's that kind of chicken and egg scenario.
Yeah. And how do you go about getting more funding? Is it just applying for more grants, or is it lobbying, or what do you have to do?
Just more grants. We've got a program out of the farm called Sponsor a Row. So corporates or individuals, if they want as well, can sponsor an actual row out on the farm. And a few other little small programs and different things that we sell and things like that.
Yeah, right. And is it, do these feel like challenges that you can overcome, or are they sort of are they big problems that needed a lot of work to get into?
No, it definitely can be overcome.
Yep.
Absolutely. I think the first, we planned it in 2017 and, COVID slowed a few things around on that expansion side of things. But it's really allowed us the time to test the model and make sure it works.
Yep.
And we know it works. And when people come down and they see it on the ground, then we find if we can get them there, we get the sponsorship. And so our main focus now is to get that sponsorship level up much higher, get those donations up higher, and then we'll hit that expansion.
Yeah. Well, I hope you do, because it's really important. And you're doing such amazing work. I really encourage everyone to jump on the foodforchange.org.au website. You can read all about it there and the partners, and you get a few photos of some nice all your veggies that you're growing there, which is nice. But it's a very real problem, and you've got a very real solution to it. And we just sort of do what we can to get behind these sort of things, because it is important. And do you know what I find so disheartening is that it's so critical. Like, just food is such a basic human need, and yet you have to work so hard to make it, efficient, not throwing out food when we've got so much and all this sort of stuff. Like, it's really quite amazing, isn't it? That I don't understand why the basics are so hard sometimes.
Yeah, I feel like always personally that we've got this level in society where we've come from a stage where, it was really, really hard, and we've solved a lot of problems around food over the years and our population growth and things like that. But you solve one problem, you create another one. And this is the result of basically a separation in society, unfortunately.
Yeah. How do you mean?
So effectively, if we go back 100 years or something, there was no food insecurity. A lot of people were very poor and dying of bad nutrition and things like that, but pretty much everyone had food on that side of things. As we started, farming and all those processes ramping up through the Industrial Revolution, we had greater access to a lot of food and things like that. But then that's created a divide as well and created the food waste problem that we have. We have food waste, in my opinion, on farms and things like that, because farmers are trying to make a living. So if I can plant 10,000 avocado trees and to sell and feed and look after my family, that's what I'm going to do. And the next farmer down the road who's an avocado farmer is going to do the same. So when there's a glut, we end up with too much. But they're doing it so they can feed their family and provide the life that they want. And that's kind of what rolls out and how we have it on that kind of scale as well.
Plus the increase in our ability in horticulture.
Yep.
Bigger machines, better technology, better chemicals, better ability to grow food. We've gotten better at it. So then you pump it out, but if the market isn't receiving it, if they're not buying it as well,
I mean, there's only a certain amount of people in the country, and they're only going to eat a certain amount of food every day. Once we grow enough of that food, technically, I mean, we know we should be able to feed everyone. There shouldn't be a food insecurity problem. But
it shouldn't be a problem, right? Well, hey, look, all the best with it. Foodforchange.org.au. People jump on, have a look. You can donate food. You can make a donation as well on theirs directly through the website, which is fantastic. And we wish you and your staff and all of the volunteers all the best with the next phase. Hope you get all the farms and the funding and all the bits. And is there any other way that people can help you apart from what we've mentioned? Have we?
If you've got any skills, especially around marketing, social media, that sort of stuff, we're always looking for people that might be able to help out. Sometimes we have people jump in for 6 months and help us on that side of things. Feel free to reach out via the website and we can have a chat and see if there's something that kind of fits and works.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. All right. Well, look, Matthew Donovan from Food for Change, thanks so much for coming on to the Good People podcast.
Yep.
I hope we can get this to a lot of people so we can spread the word and, tell everyone about the good stuff that you're doing, because it really is amazing and super important. So thanks so much for coming on.
Too easy. Thanks for having us.
You're more than welcome. This is the Good People podcast, brought to you by Another Good News. Like and subscribe, of course, because that helps us continue to run the show and bring on such amazing people. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.
Well, it's a tip of the cap, it's a pat on the back, it's a smile from ear to ear. They're the good people from round here. They're the good people from round here. Come on, let me introduce you to a few.